going back a couple of months, you may have heard rumours that this season was not going to go very well for Villa, and that round about this time of the season, we'd be embroiled with business at the bottom half of the table because of us losing our main talisman, who our lawyers tell us we are not allowed to mention anymore on the podcast, or we have a maximum amount of times we can. We've used them, like the credits, sorry, so we can't talk about him. But rumours of our demise have been greatly exaggerated. You may say it's like the boy who cried wolf. But what hasn't been exaggerated, because we've been previewing it on our Twitter page all this week, is now it's time for our preview of Villa Wolves. Welcome back to Talk of the Trinity and our Villa Wolves preview. I'm Baz Barrett, with me is Will Forrest as always. Hopefully you, by listening to this podcast, you will have found us on one of our social media channels. We are on Spotify. We are on Amazon somewhere. We are on YouTube. We are on Twitter. We may be on Apple. We are not having Tim Cook. He's not returning our calls. We're trying to get to speak to the top people because we know the fans need the premium access. But, we're doing our best. Speaking of doing our best, brings us to Saturday and Villa Wolves. And after the international break, 2 weeks off, the anticipation is building for the derby that's not quite a derby. But the atmosphere will hopefully still be something to behold. Like the Wolves players will hopefully be feeling like they've been thrown to the Wolves in terms of when the whole end gets after them. So that's the best outcome, obviously, for Villa if we get out Wolves and get the results. How are you feeling about Saturday's game, Will?
I'm not feeling as confident as I'd like. Maybe that's in anticipation of you potentially feeling confident after what we learnt with the Spurs game.
I've learnt my lessons.
I think for me, the fact that the two Emmys and also Douglas Luiz look like they're not going to feature, and there's potential question marks hanging over the heads of the fitness of Bailey, and it seems that Sanson is ruled out. There's doubts as to whether we'll win for me. I'm thinking we're probably going to end up more on an even keel at the end of the game.
Yeah, I've learnt my lessons from Buck, so optimism is well and truly kept under lock and key, break in case of emergency. But unfortunately, a couple of factors really kind of are tempering what may be my potential optimistic streak. The fact that, as you mentioned, not going to be a full-strength team because of the international break and potential fitness issues with some of the players. The fact that Wolves appear to have come into a bit of form.
They have.
It didn't seem like they played too badly at the start of the season, but weren't getting the results. And there's always that situation as the pressure goes on, and especially when the end of an era at Wolves, similar to Villa really, in a different context. So a step into the unknown, and there's always an element of how long can that nerves kind of be allowed to jangle before people start getting really kind of nervous about what's going on. But they've had a few wins in the last few weeks. Their new signings are beginning to gel. They look like they're beginning to settle down. So unfortunate for us in terms of that timing. They will go down as the last team to play the old Newcastle. So I think that will potentially go down in the history books when we look back at the history of the Premier League in 5-10 years' time. But it's not all doom and gloom in the sense that, I think that we're going to get turned over comfortably. The fact is, even with a few players out, we've still got a pretty decent team. And Wolves, they're still finding their way a bit. I mean, they're in the right direction, but I think they'll be probably feeling a slightly similar way to us in terms of eyeing it up, in terms of, I don't think they'll be looking forward to come to Villa Park. I don't think they'll be thinking, this is going to be an easy game. So if we get a fast start, football cliche 101, calm the crowd down, get the atmosphere going, then it could turn into a more comfortable afternoon than anticipation is perhaps at the moment. But I think that takes a while for players to get back into the speed of things after the international break. Players going off to various different places. So it's a sign of the journey, really, that we've been on, that even though I'm feeling, this probably hasn't come at the best time for us. A couple of years ago, this would have meant, kind of a prediction of 4-0 Wolves or something like that. But I'm feeling confident in the team that, we still should be able to get a result out of this, I would say.
I'd hope so. We obviously had our chat with the 77 Club, the Wolves podcast, and I mentioned on there that I feel it'll be a 2-2 draw, spoiler alert, but I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more now. I think having Jed Steer in goal, with not having Buendia to potentially come on, he's going to come good at some point, and say come good, he started the first 3 matches, he just needs to adapt to a new formation. Douglas Luiz, for me, is the key missing man. He's been phenomenal in 2 different roles that he's played this season, as an 8 and also very much as a holding midfielder. We're quite fortunate that we've got players who we can bring in, though will they be like for like? Of course the goalkeeper will be like for like. You wouldn't want to bring in a goalkeeper who's going to be standing on his hands trying to save the ball with his feet. I don't think Jed Steer will do that. If he does, he may get the Puskas Award for save of the season. Buendia, it's a place as a sub, so maybe Carney Chukwuemeka gets onto the bench. Hopefully Leon Bailey is fit enough for the substitutes bench. And then Douglas Luiz. See, for me, and I'm interested to hear what you think here, I wouldn't be looking to put Nakamba in necessarily for Luiz, because Nakamba's a very defensive midfielder. It's what he's good at. It's his bread and butter. But with Luiz, McGinn and Ramsey, they've all pushed on and got forward. We saw Douglas Luiz bombing on quite a bit against Man United and playing some fantastic passes, none more so than the pass and then forward run for the Watkins chance when he was one-on-one with Varane. So who do you really bring into midfield then? Do you bring in an ACM to play just behind Ings and Watkins? Do you bring in just another central midfielder? Who is he? And also, the other big question, and it maybe goes towards being a bit of a fickle fan, does Courtney Halls keep his place ahead of Axel Tuanzebe after the Tottenham game?
I mean, I think in terms of taking Nakamba first, whether he should start, it depends on the outcome of the weekly game we now like to play of guess the formation. It's like, I'd feel more... if we played 4 at the back, then I would feel more comfortable having Nakamba at the base of the 3-man centre midfield, him sitting back doing what Nakamba does. If we're playing 5 at the back, then having Nakamba in there as well is a bit too defensive at home. I mean, maybe if we were playing, no disrespect to Wolves, if we're playing one of the top teams, then maybe, Man City at home, you might think about even having Nakamba in if you're playing 5 at the back. But Wolves, whilst they're in a bit of form, if you have expectations of a team of, I'm not expecting us to go qualify for Champions League, but we've got to make a statement in terms of trying to turn Villa into a fortress, because last season, obviously all games behind closed doors, we were not the exception to the rule. We won more away games than we did at home. Yeah. But in inverted commas, normal times, you do need to get your home form going. And we're unbeaten at home so far this season. 3 games, only conceded 1 goal. So don't have too much to fear in that regard. So I'd like to see a more positive team selection if we were going to play that 5 at the back. I wouldn't play Nakamba. In terms of would I play Hawes, I probably would. I would play him ahead of Twanzebe, to be honest, just because I think most of the team weren't very good against Spurs. So I think it would be a little unfair to single him out. And obviously Twanzebe's a good player. I haven't seen enough from him to think he's got to be first choice every week when he's fit and available. I think Twanzebe and Hawes are really, if we're playing 3 at the back, they are playing for that 3rd spot in that central 3 behind Konza and Mings. I think in terms of where maybe a real kind of interesting team selection, if we do play 5 at the back or 3 centre-backs, depending which way you're looking at it, and also depending on fitness, is whether you play Bailey at left wing-back if we're playing that formation instead of Target. I mean, if he's not fit, then obviously that is the end of that one. But if Bailey's fit, I'd think about playing him at left wing back, or I suppose whether you accept that at this stage of his career he's going to have that super sub role come on, for the last half hour when the defence is tired, as he did against Everton's great effect. It was almost too successful for him if he wants to start a game, but I'd be thinking about that in terms of if we were going to play a more attacking lineup while still keeping that 3-5 at the back that we seem to have played more regularly in the last few weeks.
I think if Bailey's to start at left wing back, then that automatically picks Nakamba in the centre, because, and I forget that when we played Everton, Nakamba had a great game. I was one of the first straight on to Twitter to say, why are we bringing him on? He was great. He was fantastic. He put his foot in. He had a very good game against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup before, unfortunately, missing that penalty. I'd be inclined to put Bailey behind Ings and Watkins, or Bertrand Traore behind them, potentially. Just someone who's a little bit unpredictable, really. Matty Target's going to have to potentially deal with Adama Traore, though he hasn't played too much recently or started too much. So maybe Matty Target can think about an injury that he gets just before Traore comes on. I'd be excited to see Bailey starting. If he does, though, I'd potentially be thinking, do we go for 5 at the back with our wing-backs being Cash and Target, 2 in central midfield, McGinn and Ramsey, and then 3 up top, and having Ings, Watkins and Bailey as a front 3. So very much a 5-2-3. Watkins has to play a little bit wider, of course. Bailey can go up against Nelson Semedo. Watkins can go up against the Wolves left back. And then Danny Ings to try his luck against a back 3. The only problem there is it's 1 striker against 3 centre-backs. And we showed against Man United, and really in nullifying Harry Kane, because he didn't score against us, that 1 striker versus 3 doesn't always work.
No, and I suppose if we're going to play those 2 central players, McGinn and Ramsey, McGinn would be probably playing that deeper role than Ramsey, I would suspect, because Ramsey is still kind of learning the game. So in that stage, sometimes you just got to let him run and have somebody kind of sweeping behind. But yeah, I mean, in terms of a front 3, Bailey, Ings, Watkins, I mean, if they're all on form and firing, then that's quite a tasty front 3 for any back line to deal with. It's unfortunately, as we touched upon in the previous podcast, Watkins not being at Bodymoor Heath over the last few weeks, carelessly getting called up for England. You got Bailey in terms of training, I suppose. How much has he been training over the last few weeks? And yeah, what, as I say, once that gets going, that's quite exciting actually. In terms of whether that chemistry is going to be there quite yet, I guess we may find out. I mean, Smith has had the tendency to throw a few curveballs in terms of selection this season, but whoever we end up playing in that attacking role, I mean, in terms of mentioning there and that kind of variation in 11, Traore doesn't get in, and I think there'd be quite a few Villa fans, myself included, that if we can find a role for him, kind of on the right side of a attacking formation, whichever formation that would be, quite like to see him in there. So it is a rare compared to the last 10 years anyway, and we'll be touching upon it no doubt going on throughout the course of the season, is how to fit all the attacking players we've got in the team, which is a very rare situation for us to deal with, especially if you were listening to the strikers choice for our Ultimate 11 the last 10 years. Quite a few scratched heads and straining for names to get in the attacking third of the field. So good problem to have. Hopefully, it's a situation you could say a couple of weeks off hasn't helped us. Being positive, you could say hopefully you'll catch Wolves cold, but I don't want to jinx it. I'll give my full prediction in the segment where we're coming on to next, but I don't think it's going to be 0-0. I think there's going to be goals in this one.
Yeah, there definitely will be goals. For me, it's more the case of who's going to play. I'm scratching my head because I'm sat here chatting it through and I'm thinking, would Smith, you mentioned the curveballs, you're quite right. Would he throw another curveball in the fact that he could play Chukwuemeka in midfield, or is that two youngsters, one youngster too many? Could he potentially, instead of Bailey in that front three, and if it was me, I'd keep the front three quite narrow with one another, really pushing onto the centre-backs more to get in behind them and hopefully run them round. Could he go for a Jadon Philogene-Bidace? If Keenan Davis is fit, might he go for a bit of an aerial threat from Matty Target or Matty Cash crosses? Going back to something we mentioned earlier, though, or what I asked you, I think Twanzebe starts, and I think Twanzebe has to start over Hawes. No disrespect to the guy, but with Raul Jimenez being that sort of Harry Kane, I'll drop deep type of a striker, you're going to need someone to follow him, to niggle at him, to try and intercept the ball as he lays it off or as he turns to make his runs, because he's quite quick. That could be Tyrone Mings. It could be Twanzebe. It could be Konsa. Whoever it is, we're going to need a quick player with him, and we're also going to need two quick players to cut out the through balls that get played. He drops deep, plays it onto Neves. Neves looks then to play it through to Chan. You don't want Courtney Hawes racing across to try and get in the way, because he's not exactly the quickest, without being horrible again about him. He reads the game very well. His tackle on Lukaku proved that in the Carabao. But I think you'd feel a little bit more settled knowing that Tyrone Mings was coming across, or Konsa or Twanzebe, really, and having that speed in defence, because football is very much about fast players when you're on the attack, as we've proven with Leon Bailey.
Yeah, I mean, pace is a commodity that works well in any system, any era, any style, and players who are genuinely quick do have their place in the team, even, as demonstrated by Traore, even regardless of end product skill. I mean, in terms of, if the player, in terms of an attacking sense for a second, if they don't know what they're doing, then it's very difficult to defend against. So, mentioned in terms of from an England perspective, international week, you got Kyle Walker, when he plays kind of in the centre of defence or as part of a back three, his main role, reason why he's there, is because of his pace to sweep away any trouble. So, yeah, I mean, that is certainly a factor. I mean, I think in terms of the Hawes Twanzebe debate, I mean, it's, if you're looking in terms of a couple of years ago, if you would have woken up one day and found that Hawes had been sold, you probably wouldn't have been getting the bed sheet out and the can of paint and making a banner to go down to Villa Park. And in terms of Transabi, I don't think it's going to be the biggest surprise at the end of the season when he goes back to Man United for the third time and we don't see him again. So in terms of two players who are, in terms of Villa perspective at least, fighting to prove, both I suppose to themselves and also to the fan base, that they're actually going to be around kind of for the long term. So in that sense, I can see the arguments for Transabi. I mean, it's other areas of the field with selection issues, both historically and now. There's ones where I have more of a should be playing him, shouldn't be playing them. For them, I take the point in terms of Transabi may have a bit more pace, but I wouldn't be too disappointed if Hawes plays, simply because you got to hope that former player card gets a little bit of credit kind of in the bank for us. Another header with a couple of minutes to go. I think there'll be a few Wolves fans in the away end thinking, oh God, this is coming. But regardless of the team, regardless of the formation, which is going to be eagerly anticipated when it drops around about 2:00 on Saturday, how do you think we're going to get on, prediction-wise?
2-2 draw. 2-2 draw. Wolves will score. I think they've got too much in attack for Jed Steer, not so much the defence, And I'd say if we can limit them to long-range shots, we might have a chance. But with Ruben Neves and Jan Martino hitting them from distance, you sort of worry a little bit still. Dodonka as well scored from the edge of the box against us when they beat us during the lockdown period of football, 1-0. But I still think that we've got quite a good attack, regardless of whether Bailey plays or not. You always feel like we will score a goal. I mean, even if we play as poorly as we did against Tottenham, you felt with Watkins on the pitch, Ings on the pitch, that we could score. It only takes a moment of magic. And for someone like Watkins now, he's going to be buzzing. He came on again, didn't he, for England at the weekend? He's going to be buzzing from that, even though it's only a few minutes. Danny Ings, it only takes one goal for him, and he's going to be buzzing his tits off and hopefully getting into even better positions and feeling more confident to try things in regards to shooting and getting the ball to Watkins. But 2-2, and I think if any team's going to nick it, it'll be us.
Yeah, I think it'll be a score draw. I back both teams to get a goal. Home record so far is good, undefeated. So, yeah, that late goal, that opportunity to nick one at the death, I can see it going. Yeah, if we're going to 2-1 Villa, that's not the most outlandish selection in the world. I think in terms of getting that consistency in the team selection is just going to take a little while longer. Getting people back to fitness. International break didn't come at a good time for us. Probably didn't come at a good time for Wolves. So I'd call that a draw with my prediction. 1-1 is what I'll go for. I've learnt my lesson from Buck, as I said. Not steaming in for the win. But yeah, hopefully be a good game. Progress continuing in terms of getting the players up to speed. And, we've got a lot of fixtures coming up in the next month or so against teams who may be in or around us or below us in the table. So hopefully the start of a month full of goals.
Well, speaking of things coming up, and I'm nicking your job here a little bit, we've also got a chat with Wolves fans coming up. I'll let you lead us into that.
Well, the treats just keep coming. I mean, we're 2 weeks ahead of Halloween, but, we're certainly treating you because...
No tricks.
No, not yet. So you've heard what we've had to think ahead of the game. Now you are going to hear us somewhere else, in a different time, talking to a Wolves fan, Harry from the Wolves 77 podcast, where we got his thoughts on how Wolves are doing, where Wolves have been over the last couple of years, how he thinks the game's going to go Saturday, and also in terms of how he thinks Wolves are going to be going for the rest of the season. So listen for the jump. Ahead of Saturday, 3:00, back at Villa Park after the international break, we welcome Wolves and We also welcome onto the Talk of the Trinity podcast, Harry from Wolves podcast, the Wolves 77 Club. Thanks for joining us, Harry. Much appreciated.
No, thanks for having me on, lads. It's a pleasure.
I suppose first question from me is, why is your podcast called the Wolves 77 Club?
We get this question a lot, and when we made it, we thought it was quite straightforward because Wolves were formed in 1877. But honestly, we get asked that so much, so we probably should have called it something else thinking back, but we'll stick with it now.
No, I suppose if we would have called ours a 74 Club, we'd probably be in a similar situation to yourselves. Though moving it to slightly closer to the modern day, and we've mentioned we've had the international break, a couple of weeks, waiting for the Premier League to come back. How did you do last time out?
Our last game was a 2-1 win against Newcastle. Quite a poor performance, really, considering. I mean, it helped that Newcastle were dreadful, but our new boy Hwang Hee-chan got a double. Raul was back at it. So a really important win and a game we should be winning if we want to, get up towards the top half of the Premier League. So pretty good win, and we were happy with it overall.
So you say about getting up to that top half of the table. Start of the season, expectations are always different compared to 7 or 8 games into the season. But what were your expectations before a ball was even kicked this season?
It was a weird one because obviously new manager, obviously losing Nuno. And I think a lot of people would have been delighted with a mid-table finish. And the way we started really surprised me and a lot of Wolves fans because the football we were playing was just like night and day compared to Nuno. We used to just sit back under Nuno, hit teams on the counter, quite a defensive team. We're playing pretty much the same formation, but we're playing really attacking football. It didn't work the first 3 games. We lost them all 1-0, but it was still really good to watch. And even though we lost the first 3, the optimism in the fan base was like, wow, we could do something here. And obviously we've won 3 out of the last 4 since. So I think still mid-table would be brilliant. Everyone would be delighted with that. But I've got a weird feeling that if we can keep winning when we're not playing well, like we did against Newcastle, we might creep into that top half, which would be amazing after having a new manager.
Because you got consecutive 7th place finishes, didn't you, when you first came up? And you were really starting to establish yourself as like one of the top 8 teams, really, within the Premier League. But last season wasn't as good as previous ones. So it'd be nice to see you pushing back on again. Do you think you could get that 7th place finish then this season?
Probably not. No, that's probably a step too far. But the thing was with those 2 7th place finishes, I think there was a few factors. Like we were newly promoted, obviously, and the style we played on the counter-attacking, as I mentioned, we got so many points off the top 6. And then I think we got found out in the 3rd year, and we had some poor transfer windows. But it'd be an amazing achievement if we got 7th. My God. And I think the Premier League's a bit stronger now as well. There's more people up there competing to get up there, including you lot in Villa, who have improved a lot. So that'd be mad. I don't think that could happen. I'd stick to like a 10th or 9th.
Now, it sounds like you're in a similar position to Villa in terms of the end of an era under Nuno for yourselves, us under losing a certain player who our lawyers tell us we're not allowed to name on a podcast anymore. So in terms of Wolves moving forward, you mentioned the new manager. Who are the key players in the Lager revolution? Is it still the same players who've been constant for Wolves over the last few seasons, or have you got some new players coming to the fore now?
Yeah, pretty much. Obviously, Raul's a huge one. Neves in the midfield. I ain't going to say Cody because a lot of Wolves fans wanted to be dropped, believe it or not. Our backline's probably our weakest part, but the new players, Hwang Hee-chan, he's just come out of nowhere the last few weeks and scoring goals. He looks like the star. And even our new goalkeeper, Jose Sarr, who's replaced Rui Patricio, he's another really key player. So pretty much, yeah, it is quite similar to the stars we had before under Nuno, really. We managed to keep hold of them, thankfully.
I mean, Raul and Neves have been key to your success, haven't they, really? And you really saw a difference when Raul unfortunately picked up that injury last season. So I'm not surprised that you've mentioned those ones. And your new signing, Chan, has hit the ground running, especially against Newcastle. The 2 goals he scored were very well taken. But I suppose flipping it then, from a Wolves perspective, looking at the Villa at the moment, who is it that you think, oh, that's a danger man or maybe a danger couple of players we need to be wary of them this weekend.
Yeah. The first one that springs to mind, and I couldn't believe it when you signed him, like you come out of nowhere, was obviously Danny Ings. I would have loved him at Wolves, to be honest. And I haven't watched every Villa game. I've only watched a few. And I think you mentioned on the chat we did for our show that Watkins and Ings are not gelling, but it's probably those two. I know you brought the likes of Buendia in, but he's always on the bench, isn't he? I think he come on against Spurs. He's not a starter, but
he started the first few, but because of the international break, he's lost his way in the team because we changed the formation. But
and obviously, I watched you against Man United, and one of our old players, Courtney Horse, scored a header. I don't know what he's like at the back, lads. I don't know if you rate him, but hopefully you don't score a header off a corner, because we've got. I don't know what Villa fans think, but with Wolves, whenever we come up against an ex-player, they always seem to score. So I'd put a $5 on him getting a goal off a corner this weekend, to be honest.
For us, I think it tends to be when we play a team who haven't had a very good run of form, such as Tottenham, we always go and lose to them. We're we'll roll over, you can tickle our belly type of thing and take the 3 points. But when we play a team usually who have been on a bit of good form, usually it's like 10 or 15 games unbeaten. That's when we tend to stifle them and pick something up.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's annoying. There's always little voodoos like that in football, aren't there, that you just can't shake. But yeah, our one's the ex-player one, as I mentioned. So put a $5 on it, honestly, it'll happen.
The thing is, with the games that we've had as well previously, between the Villa and Wolves, I've sort of feared Wolves a little bit, especially in the Championship days. We got that great victory at Villa Park the season that you went up. But then when we came back up, you obviously beat us 2-0 at your place, then 1-0 at ours. We fared a little bit better last season, getting the 4 points off you. How do you think it'll be come Saturday?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I was saying to my mate the other day, it's the first time, I don't want to sound like arrogant or like a cocky Wolves fan here, but it's the first time I've gone to Villa Park in the last few years and actually feared going. Like, I think we're the underdogs personally. I think you're the slight favourites. And in recent years, I was always confident we'd get a result. Obviously, you mentioned the 4-1 thrashing. I thought we beat you quite well at home that year in the Championship. You mentioned that I think it was 2-1, wasn't it, or 2-0 in one of the Premier League years. Beat you 1-0. And last year was 0-0, wasn't it, in lockdown? But that was such a weird game. And Sace, I remember Sace missed a sitter. But yeah, I'm quite fearful, lads. I think it's going to be a really tough game for us. Obviously, you lot will be up for it, a full Villa Park. It's always a intimidating place to go, I guess, for an away team. And I'll take a draw, definitely. But I fear the worst, I must admit. I fear the worst going to Villa Park this week.
So in terms of going to Villa Park, most of us have feared it for the last 10 years. And that's Villa Park's based on what's been going on the pitch for most of that 10 years. But yeah, when the crowd is up at Villa, there's always a good atmosphere. I mean, I think in terms of, I suppose, the traditional kind of criticism of Villa Park is if you can keep the home crowd quiet for half an hour, then perhaps they begin to get on the back of the team. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of, from a Villa perspective, I think it'll be a tight game. If we had a full strength team, then I'd maybe be veering more towards a Villa win, but we've got a few players out, international break and injuries, and just quite looking for that consistency in terms of selection at the moment. So good afternoon. I think it'll be a draw for me. I think it'll be a score draw, but yeah, I can see this one going either way.
I'd take a draw, but my gut feeling, if I'm being completely honest, I think it'd be like a 2-1 Villa or something like that. Obviously, I want to be biased. I want to be like, if we go in my heart, I'm going to say like 3-0 Wolves, but in my head, it's 2-1 Villa for me. Coming off the back of the international break, I know everyone says this. It come at a bad time for Wolves, really. We'd won 2 in a row. We got back on it, even though we weren't playing that well, as I mentioned. But I think we're going to come in a bit cold, and I think you're going to do, especially Villa Park's going to be rocking in it. And if we can keep you quiet, I'd love to do that. As you mentioned, if we can keep you quiet for the first half hour or so. But yeah, I'd snap your hand off at a draw, but I think 2-1 Villa, as I say, if I had to guess.
I think a draw will be a fair result. I said on your podcast, I think it'll be a 2-2 draw. I do worry about our goalkeeper being Jed Steer and not Emi Martinez.
Oh, is he out, is he? Yeah.
He is with Argentina. So I worry about that a little bit. But then I also think if Ings and Watkins can click, or if Leon Bailey can play, then we stand half a chance. But looking back, well, I suppose looking at the start of the season and also looking at the here and now, the one question we've asked every fan that's come onto our show is, come the end of the season, Wolves compared to Villa, are you going to finish higher or lower than us? What do you think?
Oh, that's a tough one because we are so close, aren't we? Really, I've got to
I
go
felt
with Wolves.
confident before with most.
I've got to go with Wolves, haven't I? I've got to say, I think we're just pip you by like literally a place or something, or like a point. Look, at the moment, you're 1 point ahead of us.
Yeah.
I think we'll finish 1 point ahead of you come the end of the season and be like 9th, 10th, in and around there. I've got to back us on that one.
Yeah, I think you're only well, we've had 4 people on apart from yourself. So you're the second who have said that you'll finish above us. So at the moment, we've got Wolves and Everton finishing above us, and we've got Newcastle and Tottenham finishing below us. We just need to get on the rest of the Premier League, and we can see where we're going to finish this season.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's because obviously I've spoke to you two on our show too, and you two are quite. I think you're quite modest. I've spoken to a few of my Villa fan mates, and I think at one point they genuinely thought you might push towards like the top 6. Is that just out the window, or are a lot of Villa fans thinking that?
I mean, from my point of view, there was a time when we had Jack Grealish this summer and Leon Bailey was joining, and we'd already got Ashley Young, we'd already got Emi Buendia in, and both of those allegedly have been told that they've been brought to play with Jack Grealish. So pushing for top 6 when you're thinking you're getting Leon Bailey, Jack Grealish, Ollie Watkins, and whoever else comes in through the door, and your goalkeeper's just gone and won the Copa America, you're probably thinking, well, we can get this top 7 here. We can get into that bargain European League, whatever it's called, and push on. But now, I think it's very much a case of, for me, I'd want us to finish top half. I want us to finish better off than we did last season, being 11th. But if we get more points, I'd be quite happy with that at the moment. Next season will be make or break. And I think you feel the same about that, don't you?
Yeah, I think in terms of, there are, I'd say a minority, but a vocal minority of Villa fans who are expecting Europe this season. I think in terms of next season, with another summer transfer window to come, I think that will turn to a majority expecting European qualification, because then that would be our 4th season in the Premier League next year, assuming we don't get relegated. Touch wood.
Yeah, but that sounds like a lot like the Wolves fan base, really, because obviously we come 7th twice, and then the 3rd year under Nuno, everyone, that's the expectation then, isn't it? So then when we come like 13th, everyone, well, that's why he lost his job, really, I think. He got stale, and a lot of the fan base were annoyed. We're fickle, aren't we, fans? Sometimes I think you have to remember where, you have to be quite realistic, and I think the success the first 2 years under Nuno shot him in the foot in the 3rd year. But thankfully, the majority of our fan base, like you mentioned with the Villa fan base, do think realistic mid-table. I think you've got to be realistic, haven't you? Too much pressure is just not fair, is it? Too much expectation, I guess.
So looking at the players, like we said about expectations, do you think that you could expect to keep Ruben Neves and Raul Jimenez and some of your other key players? I suppose Adama Traore I'll throw in there because he's constantly linked with other teams. If you don't finish 8th, 9th, do you think you'll hold on to them?
It's a tough one. Well, Adama Traore at the moment is not signing a new contract, and it's been going on and on and on, and he hasn't been starting the last few games. He's been on the bench, which is, I think, to do with the contract. Ruben Neves, he seems really happy. He's always linked with Man United and that, but he never hints that he wants to leave. He's probably our next captain if Cody ends up getting dropped or moved on. Raul, I think because he got injured, he's going to stick around. I think, you know what I mean? I think he'll at least stay for another year or 2. I know he's coming up to his 30s now. But yeah, I think, when we lost Jota, I was quite shocked at that. And that made me realise, we're not going to keep our best players forever. But I think they're quite settled. But if we did have a bit of a disaster and come like 16th or something, and it all starts to fall apart, I would worry that we will lose a few of them, definitely. But fingers crossed, we do keep them.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be marching towards those European places together, either this season or next season.
Yeah,
definitely. I suppose I've got one last question for you, and I only need a one-word answer really for this. Team I hate more than anybody else. You knew I was going to ask this. It's not the Blues for me. I absolutely hate West Bromwich Albion. How much do you hate West Brom?
A lot, yeah. No,
Friends for life. Friends for
it's
life.
it's a weird one because obviously, well, I'm 30, so in my lifetime, we haven't played them too much in the last decade. But whenever we have, they've beat us or we've drew. We've got such a terrible record against them, so we waited all these years to play them again in lockdown when they was in the Premier League. We had a better team than them by a mile, and they ended up beating us 3-2 at Molineux. There's some kind of weird curse on us when we play Albion. But yeah, it's a bitter rivalry. It is the biggest for Wolves. Albion is the biggest rivalry. Villa, honestly, for years, I used to, I didn't mind Villa. I still don't really, but I think because of that Championship season, there is a bit of an edge to it, isn't there? Like you mentioned on our podcast, it's not a massive derby, but there is that little edge, isn't there? After that race we had for promotion and all that mind the gap stuff. But yeah, Albion are definitely the ones that are the main rivals, and they always will be. They always will be.
There was a bit of Villa arrogance at the time, wasn't there? We've just come
Maybe.
down, we're going to come straight back up, mind the gap and all that. And then you obviously finished above us. But
Yeah.
I hate West Brom even more now just because they beat you last season. I despise them. I hate them.
Yeah, God, it was painful that was when they beat us at Molineux. I honestly thought Nuno was going to lose his job that day, by the way, but he stayed on to the end of the season. And then we can only manage a draw at the Hawthorns as well later on in the season. So we'll play him again, hopefully.
No, there may have been a bit of the end of an era when Nuno at the end of his third season in the Premier League, but at least he wasn't Paul Lambert still in charge.
Yeah, every cloud. Yeah. Brilliant.
Great, I think that's well. Thank you for your time and coming on to the show. It's really appreciated, and we'll have to do this again when we come to Molineux.
Definitely, lads. Yeah, and same. Thanks for coming on our show too, and may the best team win. Hopefully, that's Wolves.
Oh no, Villa. See ya.
So you've heard from us. You've heard from Harry. All that's left now is to get ready for the game on Saturday. But before that, check us out on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. Like, share, comment positively. Our moms read the Twitter page, so not too aggressive, otherwise it makes them sad. Share us on the Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, wherever else we've managed to pop up in the next couple of days. And join us again next week, where we'll be reviewing the Wolves game, talking about all things Villa, and answering the main question that we're going to have at 3 o'clock Saturday. Will Leon Bailey, will he have been dancing with Wolves, or will he have been toying with them before unleashing another unstoppable shot into the whole end? Into the net, I should probably clarify, not into Rose Ed on the whole end up.
Watch out, Mum.
Yep. I mean, she thought it was just the abusive comment she had to watch out for. now it's Leon Bailey's balls. And
that's even worse.
Yep. And on that bombshell, and before we dig ourselves into too much of a further hole, I'm Baz Barrett. With me is Will Forrest, as always. Thank you for listening. Up the Villa.
Watch out for Leon's balls. Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. Up the Villa.